First this hour, though, we're going to start with the situation in Israel. Israel saying the remains of two more hostages returned the day before from Gaza have now been identified as those as Aryeh Zalmanovich and Master Sergeant Tamir Adar. 85-year-old Zalmanovich, at the time of his death, was abducted from his home in Kibbutz Nir Oz, killed in captivity just over a month after Hamas's raid on Israel. Adar killed as he fought to defend the kibbutz, then his body taken captive. The confirmation meaning that Hamas has now released 15 of the 28 hostage bodies pledged to be returned under the ceasefire deal. They were supposed to return them all. Well, we're going to cross to Jerusalem, talk to our correspondent Noga Tarnopolsky, who joins us from there. Noga, then, the number of hostages being returned, it's creeping up, but it's still only around half of those that are supposed to have been returned.
That's exactly right. And the feeling in Israel remains for what it was from the start, that Hamas actually does have immediate access to many, many more of the bodies, that it should have returned all those bodies that it had under its hand more than a week ago now, Monday of last week, and that the fact that it's being dragged out, I'm quoting officials here, and the bodies are being released one a day at a pace of two a day, sometimes none a day, is really a form of psychological terror towards the Israelis, in particular the hostages' families, but also, a show of leverage, a sort of leverage against the Israeli government. That said, the fact that two were released yesterday is also being perceived as the fact that Hamas does understand it's under pressure. Remember that just a few days before, Hamas said, that's it, we don't have access to any more of these dead bodies, and since then it still has released three. So a lot of pressure is being placed on both sides, but this drip-by-drab method of releasing these dead bodies really is having a very negative impact here in Israel.
Noga, it comes as well, as I mentioned, in the main headlines as JD Vance is meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu today. Vance voicing great optimism yesterday over the ceasefire. Right. This is really a very fascinating diplomatic juncture that we're at. JD Vance is known by everyone, including certainly by Israelis, as being very much part of the kind of hard America First grouping. That he didn't believe Israel should be receiving military aid from the United States during the campaign. The Israeli officials here are eyes wide open about who he is. But I want to give us a wider lens picture. Marco Rubio is landing here tomorrow from Qatar, and the president's envoy and his son-in-law, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner are still here on the ground, and they have set up something that has never before existed in the history of the State of Israel, which is an American-run military base, a headquarters, civilian military headquarters in the south of the country, in Kiryat Gat. And matters within Gaza are being operated from that headquarters. Now, there are Israeli representatives there. There is the general in charge of the Southern Command and a personal representative from the Prime Minister. But Israel is no longer it appears Israel is no longer in charge of this operation, but is really going to be following American command. So while we hear from the US president, fairly quite a clip now, threats against Hamas, and while in public, Witkoff and even JD Vance refrain from any criticism of Prime Minister Netanyahu, de facto, we are seeing an American takeover of the situation and an imposition of the American view of what this ceasefire means. So, for example, going to your earlier question, if the bodies of dead Israeli hostages are not being returned at the pace that the ceasefire agreement dictated they should be returned, Israeli ministers were calling for war on day one. But the Americans have come in, they have taken over operations, and they're saying this war is over and you're going to just have to follow our pace now. It's a very, I would say, volatile situation in terms of internal Israeli politics. Is being perceived more and more as somebody under Donald Trump.